Jason Munson here with Playing with Fire, where we discuss success accelerators and risk retardants. And I'm here with my good friend Sterling Lund, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Sterling does here, and get some of his wisdom. So first off, kind of give a short summary of what you're all about, what you do.
I'm Sterling Lund with Refuge Investments. We buy apartment buildings in the southeast, and we enjoy taking care of the residents that live in our properties.
Okay, easily done. How long have you guys been doing that?
A few years now. Came out of the apartment building industry. Been building apartments since getting out of college. So this is a space I love.
Okay, so you started building, and then eventually you turned over to investing.
That's right.
Right. Okay, cool. All right, so talking about entrepreneurs, people in business, this is kind of one of these things where you get to say what you always want to say to somebody, but you can't really say it.
Okay.
What is the biggest risk or the dumbest thing you see business owners do that they're just shooting themselves in the foot?
Well,
or investors, for that matter.
My opinion, your largest risk is getting involved in things that you're not an expert in. As an investor, if you're competent in a space, say you grew up in the medical industry and you know all about the business of pharmaceuticals or transplants, or that's your specialty. If you decide one day that because you've been so successful in that market, you should go ahead and invest in electric cars, I believe you set yourself up for some vulnerabilities because your experience doesn't overlay well with the risk you're about to expose yourself to. Okay. So staying in your lane is a way to avoid those kind of pitfalls.
All right. What about investor? Or I'm sorry, back up. What about people who are raising money? Because you've raised a considerable amount of money.
Yes.
So, what's amateur 101? Don't do risk behavior when you're raising money. What's kind of the worst thing somebody can do when they're starting out?
What an interesting question. What's the worst thing you could do?
What
are some of the shortfalls of this?
I guess, when somebody's starting out, like maybe people have some ideas about how they're going to go raise money that are just flat out wrong, or they're risky. So how about this? What's the riskiest money you can get?
Well, hard money. When you decide that you're going to pursue a passion and you go after a hard money loan is debt. That means that somebody's going to hold you accountable for a certain performance in a short amount of time. And then the fees, of course, are very high and very steep. When you don't happen to perform at the level that you promised, everything comes unraveled. And you can't fix it because the hard money guy has made the decision that his risk is too high and he's going to recapture his capital by taking your deal. I think that some of the things that are very important when you're going to raise capital, make an effort at raising capital, is that you have to clarify your story. If you come to folks with a great idea, this is going to be great and we're all going to make a lot of money, the chances of bringing somebody along who just believes in your vision puts them at risk, and that puts your reputation on the line if you can't actually execute on all the things you mentioned. And then the other is a sophisticated investor is going to ask you more questions than you're prepared to answer. They're going to ask you things like, what's my ROI? That's return on investment. What's my risk-adjusted return? And if you haven't matured your knowledge of the business or your knowledge of raising capital, you'll begin to get thrown back on your heels because their questions are quite relevant to them, but they might be new to you because you're new to raising capital. And that sets you back, especially in their eyes, because now they're like, oh wait, you're not very serious because you're not talking my language, so you're not really smart enough or savvy enough to protect my capital. I'm going to wait for another investment. I'm not going to help you with yours. And then you lose the opportunity to make that sale effectively, or invite that investor to come alongside because you weren't prepared to have that conversation.
So another thing I know that it is a temptation for somebody who's raising money is to embellish the deal and to maybe make it look a little bit better than it actually is, and maybe try to hide, some of the cracks in the cement, so to speak.
Yes, that's unfortunate. I think that that's driven often by a scarcity mentality that believes that if I'm not presenting the perfect picture, I won't raise money. The risk, again, is your reputation. The risk, again, depending on how far you embellish, can include legal action.
Yeah.
Because your obligation to an investor and your obligation during raising capital is to be transparent. If you share all of the facts, then even if something goes wrong, you can look across the table at the investor and go, we knew there was a risk to this investment. It's unfortunate, but that's what this investment this is what's occurred on the investment. And that becomes a genuine conversation. All investment has risk. The stock market has risk. That's why there's so much paperwork involved. But I like the approach of being utterly transparent, because the confidence that builds with the other party who knows there's risk is waiting for you to acknowledge that same risk that they know exists. And if you just avoid that conversation and you ignore the common well-known risks of your investment, whether that's a restaurant or whether that's you're starting an auto body shop, it doesn't really matter. Those actually normal risks make you more believable, make you more valuable as a businessman to that investor, because you're being transparent and you're being honest with them, because their hard-earned capital is very important to them, and they want you to show them that kind of respect. That's what I've learned, and I've always believed.
Okay, great stuff. So that kind of transferring over to our other side of this is, what are some of the top tier, what are the best capital raisers? What do they do that just kind of makes them better? Obviously, you talked about full disclosure and transparency, but what else can somebody who's raising capital, if they really want to be at the top of that game, what's one or two things that you've seen or that you've done?
I've learned that most of the significantly successful capital raisers, the primary thing that they've done in their lives is create a base of relationships that they've garnered trust with over the years. It doesn't really matter after that time, after that relationship's built, it doesn't matter near as much what opportunity they're bringing to that investor. It's that investor has already seen the results of this person's diligence, of this person's efforts in the past to make sure that they only bring good investments to this investor. That gives that investor a lot of confidence that this capital raiser, I guess it's credibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has established all this credibility with them. I think another thing that, even in a new relationship for an experienced capital raiser, is the expediency or the briefness of the presentation to give all the pertinent facts. Because when you start to talk to particularly larger, more sophisticated investors, they're not talking to you or about your project once a week. They're talking to 30 or 40 opportunities brought to them every week. And in their world, they're trying to control their time. So we don't want to waste their time. And the more concise you are and the more direct you can be about A, B, C, this is what we're going to accomplish, this is how we're going to accomplish it, this is why you can believe us, here are the risks, but here are our rewards, this is the kind of money we're trying to raise. You allow them to get to the part of making a decision so much quicker that you also gain their respect. Even if they say no to you on this deal, maybe it's not the right time for them, maybe they're waiting for another deal to sell and they're going to come up with capital later, but because you used and valued their time so much up front, they will accept your phone call next time. They will invite you. When you say, hey, would you have coffee with me? They'll say yes next time, because you began to establish that rapport that said, your time is so valuable, I'm going to be very direct with you. And I think that's a key to building and maintaining a relationship of capital.
Awesome. Well, Sterling, I appreciate your time this morning. And you know, when you think about the concept of playing with fire, when you're raising money, you really are playing with fire, quite literally.
That's fair.
You know, but you know, there's ways that you just talked about is where you can mitigate your risk. So if the deal does go sideways and south, you can shake hands and look that person in the eye, you know, without feeling like you did something wrong. You know, of course, you still always feel bad if your deal didn't fly. But on the plus side, if you when you get deals to go through, as you commonly do, and that's why you're still here doing it, it just feels so good.
That's right. And you know, it depends on the space you're playing in as to how many risks you're going to take, right? We tend to buy existing apartment buildings with 30 years of rental income history. We know what we're buying. It makes a lot of the variables go away. We're not trying to build something new. We're not trying to promise massively bigger increases in rent that we can't justify by the neighboring properties' rent roll. We minimize those risks for our investors, and that's why we are able so far to give really great stories.
Fantastic. Well, you do have a great story, and again, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. This
Thanks,
is Jason Munson, Playing with Fire, Sterling Lund.
Have a great day.